everybody. So this is unfortunately our last lecture of the semester. For today I had you reading two different stories. I had you reading No Name Woman by Maxine Hong Kingston and Two Kinds, which is a chapter out of Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. But before we begin, there is quite a bit of housekeeping that we have to complete. The first thing is about your final exam. So as you know, my exams are they are divided into two portions, right? The take-home and then the in-class portion. Obviously, it would be redundant for me to give you a multiple choice final exam if you have your books in front of you. I mean, really, where's the allure in that? So I've thought about this quite a bit, and I've decided that I'm going to assign you an essay form. Sort of like it's going to be exactly the way that the take-home midterm was structured, okay? Except this time you are going to have to answer 20 questions, which will each be 30 points a pop, okay? So that equals to 600 possible points. I will post the exam between May 9th and 10th, probably closer to May 9th because May 10th is Mother's Day and I'm not doing anything on May 10th. And your final exam will be due on Blackboard May the 16th at 11:59 p.m. Okay, that's giving you an entire week to do it. It's 20 questions. That may seem like a lot, but honestly, if you answer half a page each, which I know that you're more than capable of doing so, that's a little less than 10 pages, okay? So it's going to be 20 questions. It's going to be short answer. I don't want an essay for each question. Okay, don't pull a me. Right. It's going to be over everything that we've gone over from the end of the midterm to now. Okay. Like I said, it should be on by Saturday because Mother's Day is on the 10th and I don't want to do anything. And it will be due on Saturday, May 16th at 11:59. Only reason I'm having it due then is because grades will be due the week after. I think they're due on the 19th, and I need time to grade. Okay, so you know, have pity on this old woman here. So that, the second thing that we're going to go over is this. Okay, so, a couple of y'all have been sending me messages yesterday about Star Wars. Yes, y'all, I do enjoy Star Wars, okay? I actually got into Star Wars the same way that I got into, Star Trek, and what happened was I was in middle school and my best friend and I went to the cinema to watch a film. And back in my day when I was little, Cielo Vista had cinemas inside. So I think there were 3 cinemas inside, and then there's 6 of them were the outside in the parking lot. Okay, so our parents would make us watch the films that were inside of Cielo Vista because it was safer. I'm not quite sure how. The cinemas at Cielo Vista were right next to the Walgreens, and I think that's like a Victoria's Secret now. It's on the bottom section. Okay, yes, I'm dating myself. I'm incredibly old, I know. So, when we were watching this one film, I know I was in middle school. I wasn't in high school yet. There was a bookstore across the way from the cinema, and I went in. I didn't have much money, and I saw this book, which I'm not sure if you can see because my cameraman decided to run away. Okay, my cameraman came back. So I have an e-version of this book because my other version somehow got destroyed. My arm hurts.
Okay.
Okay. So I found this book, Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. It was in paperback. I got it. I bought it instead of eating popcorn. I read it and I was hooked. Before then, I had never seen a Star Wars movie. I think I knew about the robots and that's it. This got me into it. I've read most of the Star Wars books out there. I've watched all the movies. I didn't enjoy all the movies, but I've watched them all. So yeah, if you're interested and if you're sort of like me who wants to get into a series by reading the book first, I seriously recommend you read this one. This one's great. It's fun. My favorite character is in it. It's wonderful. So anyway, you all should read it. Alright, so for today, why don't we get started with No Name Woman, which is found in your book, 3349. By the way, that noise that you hear, that's our refrigerated air. I'm so cold. It's great. Refrigerated air is the best, right?
Yeah, I'm straight it is.
3349, the No Name Woman. You must not tell anyone, my mother said, what I am about to tell you in China. Your father had a sister who killed herself. She jumped into the family well. We say that your father has all brothers because it is as if she had never been born. Alright, so the reason that I chose these two stories 10th semester isn't just because I am obsessed with Chinese American literature. It's a little bit. But also because these two stories really reflect this idea of what it is to be an American. In this story, Kingston really reflects on what's missing as an American. She listens to this sort of fable story, okay, an embalming story of her auntie who has been erased from the family. Why has she been erased, and what consequence does that have on her niece who is Chinese American? Okay, and I like the way this starts off, okay, because it tells you you cannot be talking about your auntie. Your auntie never existed. Okay, so this is a complete erasure from family. Okay, and I told you all that probably that the worst punishment in my area of study, which is medieval to Renaissance British literature, is exile. You left. You weren't part of a family anymore. You were just left on your own. No tribe would take you. No other family would take you either. And this is what happened to this woman, right? She committed her sin. She was pregnant out of wedlock, and she was exiled off. Okay, and in exile, she was completely erased from the family. Right? So we continue on with this story. In 1924, just a few days after our village celebrated 17 hurry-up weddings to make sure that every young man who went out on the road would responsibly come home, your father and his brothers and your grandfather and his brothers and your auntie's new husband sailed for America, the Cold Mountain. Okay? All of them sent money home. We already know this story, right? We read this story. We know that how the Chinese came to the United States, not only to work on the Transcontinental Railroad, but also on the Gold Rush, and this is how they ended up in the north part of California in San Francisco. Okay, so this is immigration. We know this happened. What we didn't know was the women that left back in China, they were arranged marriages so they could go back. All right? I remember looking at your aunt one day when she and I were dressing. I had not noticed before that she had such a protruding melon of a stomach, but I did not think she's pregnant until she began to look like other pregnant women, her shirt pulling and the white tops of her black pants showing. She could not have been pregnant, you see, because her husband had been gone for years. No one said anything. We didn't discuss it. In early summer, she was ready to have the child, long after the time it would have been possible. Okay, so that's a big oops. Okay. And remember what we talked about when we read The Awakening, when we read the other two. Okay, oftentimes in this sort of literature, or in certain, actually the majority of cultures blame women for any sort of transgression that occurs during the marriage. Okay, it's always the woman's fault. No, it's always the blame is somehow put upon the woman. Okay, and here there is it's no different, and it's actually terrifying what happens to this poor woman. Okay, so she's pregnant. Okay, and you're like, what big deal? She's pregnant. She slept with some guy, not her husband. Okay, big deal. No, this is a big deal. Okay, because in China, the communities were very tightly wound. Okay, so if something happened to one of the families, or something occurred within a family like a tragedy, it affected the entire community. So think of them more so as tribes than community. So let's look. I'm going to keep using the word tribe then. And this was a sin that was committed against the tribe entire. The village had also been counting. On the night the baby was to be born, the villagers raided our house. Some were crying like a great saw teeth strung with lights. Files of people walked zigzag across our land, tearing the rice. Their lanterns doubled in the disturbed black water which drained away through the broken bunds. As the villagers closed in, we could see some of them, probably men and women we knew well, wore white masks. The people with long hair hung it over their faces. Women with short hair made it stand on end. Some had tied their white bands around their foreheads, arms, and legs. At first they threw mud and rocks at the house. Then they threw eggs and began slaughtering our stock. We could hear the animals scream to their deaths, the roosters, the pigs, the last great roar from an ox. Familiar wild heads flared flared in our night windows. The villagers encircled us. Some of the faces stopped to peer at us, their eyes rushing like searchlights. The hands flattened against the panes, framed heads, and left red prints. The villagers broke in the front and the back doors at the same time, even though we had not locked the doors against them. Their knives dripped with the blood of our animals. They smeared the blood on the doors and the walls. One woman swung a chicken whose throat she had slit, splattering blood in red arcs about her. We stood at the middle of the house in the family hall with the pictures and tables of the ancestors around us, looking straight ahead. At the time, the house only had 2 wings. When the men came back, we would build 2 more to enclose our courtyard, and a 3rd one to begin a 2nd courtyard. The villagers pushed through the wings, even your grandparents' rooms, to find your aunt's, which was also mine until the men returned. From this room, a new wing for the younger families would grow. They ripped up her clothes and shoes and broke her combs, grinding them underfoot. They tore her work from the loom, they scattered the cooking fire and rolled the new weaving into it. We could hear them in the kitchen breaking our bowls and banging the pots. They overturned the great waist-high earthenware jugs, duck eggs, pickled fruits, vegetables burst out amid and acrid torrents. The old woman from the next field swept a broom across the air and loosed the spirits of the broom over our heads. Pig, ghost, pig, they sobbed and scolded while they ruined the house. Okay, so that's a big thing that just happened to this family, right? It's a horrible event that's happening, and you're probably asking yourself, I mean, why would they do something like this? Okay, why? It makes absolutely no sense. Why destroy the house of this poor family? Well, you find out, okay, that it is because she was pregnant out of wedlock. Okay, look at that same page. Don't let your father know I told you. He denies her. Now that you have started to menstruate, what happened to her can happen to you. Don't humiliate us. You wouldn't like to be forgotten as if you never had been born. The villagers are watchful. Okay. Whenever she had to warn us about life, my mother told stories that ran like this one, a story to grow up on. She tested our strengths to establish realities. In those in immigrant generations who could not reassert brute survival died young and far from home. Those of us in the first American generations had to figure out how the invisible world the immigrants built around our childhood fits in solid America. The immigrants confused the gods by diverting their curses, misleading them with crooked streets and false names. They must try to confuse their offspring as well, I suppose, threaten them in similar ways, always trying to get things straight, always trying to name the unspeakable. Alright, so this is what I call the Exile of Ghosts, right? Okay, so this is a fable. Her mother is telling her, don't do this, you're starting to menstruate, you can have kids out of wedlock, please be careful, otherwise you will be exiled and you will be forgotten, just as your aunt was, right? And I like what Maxine has written here, because basically she's saying, well, what are first generations going to do? Are they going to go ahead and just take this from just face value? Do they take these thoughts and these ideas into America, where this doesn't necessarily happen? And it's, I mean, women having children out of wedlock isn't necessarily accepted, but your house isn't going to be destroyed. All right, so she's balancing these two out in her life. Okay. And she tells us a little more about her auntie, okay? And I have this little note right here that I made, okay? The rape and consensual, okay? So there's 2 ways this could have gone. She was either raped by somebody in the community, or she consented to have adulterous relationships with someone in the community, all right? So the first one is the rape one, and I think that this is quite possibly the one that makes the most sense, not taking away the autonomy of a woman in her body, but the thing is at this rate, the woman knew the consequences, and I feel that her being raped is probably much more common, especially the way that these women were raised, okay? Of course, you're more than welcome to bring that up in discussion. If you don't agree, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Or, there's probably going to be a question on your final about this. So let's go ahead and continue and talk about this. Let's go to 3351. Adultery is extravagance. Okay, to be a woman, to have a daughter in starvation time was waste enough. My aunt could not have been the lone romantic who gave everything up for sex. Women in old China did not choose. Some man had commanded her to lie with him and be his secret evil. I wonder whether he masked himself when he joined the raid on her family. Alright, so this is something, that's very uncomfortable, right? That the man was definitely a part of her community. And now she has to think, well, did he cover himself up when he was destroying the house as well to cover up his sin? Perhaps she had encountered him in the field or in the mountain when the daughters-in-law collected fuel, or perhaps he first noticed her in the marketplace. He was not a stranger because the village housed no strangers. She had to have had dealings with him other than sex. Perhaps he worked in an adjoining field, or he sold her the cloth for the dress she sewed and wore. His demand must have surprised her, then terrified her. She obeyed him. She always did as she was told. Okay. They both gave. Okay, then she talks about her husband, right? The husband that she really doesn't remember, because remember they all went. The men went to America to gain their money, and then what happens after the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act? Well, they worked all that hard. They have their wife back in China. Can't bring her. Okay, you see the problem that this caused. But for right now, they're not thinking about that, of course. The other man was, after all, not much different from her husband. They both gave orders, and she followed. If you tell your family, I'll beat you, I'll kill you, be here next week. No one talked sex ever, and she might have separated the raped from the rest of the living if only she did not have to buy her oil from him or gather wood in the same forest. I want her fear to have lasted as long as rape lasted, so that the fear could have been contained. No drawn-out fear. But women at sex hazard birth and hence lifetimes. The fear did not stop but permeated everywhere. She told the man, I think I'm pregnant, and he organized the raid against her. So yeah, that's pretty intense. That's incredibly intense. And then Kingston writes a little bit more about the story. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the danger that her auntie had. And there's a reason why she doesn't have a name. We'll talk about that right now. But let's talk about the fear that this woman had. Okay, realizing that if she's raped, she's pregnant. She tells the guy, hey, I'm pregnant. And then what happens? Her family's life and her lives are destroyed as well. Okay, and her life is gone. I mean, there is no more life for her at all. Let's look at 3352, going on with this idea. My mother must have lived in the same house as my parents and eaten at the outcast table. My mother spoke about the raid as if she had seen it, when she and my aunt, a daughter-in-law to a different household, should not have been living together at all. Daughters-in-law live with their husband's parents, not their own. A synonym for marriage in Chinese is taking a daughter-in-law. And we learned this, right, from Miss Spring Fragrance, that the wife in the story, the mother in the story, had to stay behind in China to take care of her in-laws. Okay, this is perfectly normal. In Mexico, that's actually thought of as well. Alright, my grandmother used to say that, and this makes no sense in English, okay, but I'll just tell you, she used to say that I was flour from a different sack, because I got married. So that's actually a pretty common thought. Daughters-in-laws, her husband's parents could have sold her, mortgaged her, stoned her, but they had sent her back to her own mother and father, a mysterious act hinting at disgraces not told me. Perhaps they had thrown her out to deflect the avengers. She was the only daughter. Her 4 brothers went with her father, husband, and uncles out on the road for some years, and for some years became Western men. When the goods were divided among the family, 3 of the brothers took land, and the youngest, my father, chose an education. After my grandparents gave their daughter away to the husband's family, they had dispensed all the adventure and all the property. They expected her alone to keep the traditional ways, which her brothers, now among the barbarians, could fumble without detection. And that is so important, right? Because we joke around. I have a friend in England. She is a Dallas Cowboys fan, and her husband is a San Francisco 49er fan. Okay, but they make the marriage work, right? Hi, Lauren. And my sports sister, she had a little boy last year, cute kid. And I always tell her, religion is like sport. Sports are like religion. They go through the mother side. Okay, so your son has to be a Dallas Cowboy fan. Okay, just like us. But it's serious here that it's the woman who has to continue on, right? The traditions, who has to have the traditional ways, because she's the one who stays at home. Okay, so that puts an extra level of burden upon this auntie who finds herself pregnant out of wedlock. Okay, because now she has destroyed the traditional ways. How is she going to continue on the traditional ways with a child? To them, it is unthinkable. to us now would say, why not? Maybe she could make more traditional ways. But to them, it would have been something impossible. All right, let's go on here. Let's go to the next paragraph. All right. This is the number 2. This is the consensual, right? Perhaps my aunt, my forerunner, caught in a slow life, let dreams fade and grow and fade, and after some months or years went toward to that resisted. Fear at the enormities of the forbidden kept her desires delicate, wire, and bone. She looked at a man because she liked the way the hair was tucked behind his ears, or she liked the question mark line of a long torso curving at the shoulder and straight at the hip. For warm eyes or a soft voice or a slow walk, that's all. A few hairs, a line, a brightness, a sound, a tiredness. A pigtail that didn't toss when the wind dried. Why, the wrong lightning could erase the dearest thing about him. It could very well have been, however, that my aunt did not take subtle enjoyment from her friend, but a wild woman kept rollicking company. Imagining her free with her sex doesn't fit, though. I don't know any women like that or any men. Unless I see her life branching into mine, she gives me no ancestral help. To sustain her being in love, she often worked herself in the mirror, guessing at the colors and shapes that would interest him, changing them frequently in order to hit on the right combination. She wanted him to look back. Okay, so this is the second scenario, right? The consensual scenario, the one where the woman is given a bit more agency. Nowadays, some of us would feel very comfortable with this one, right? Because she has a choice of what she can do. Okay, and however, the situation's the same. She gets pregnant. Okay, the destruction of her life and the village. But this situation, a bit more agency, right? A bit more choice. But like she says, this is very rare. She doesn't know of a lot of people who did this. Look at the bottom of 3353. She may have been unusually beloved, the precious daughter, spoiled and mirror-gazing because of the affection her family lavished on her. When her husband left, they welcomed the chance to take her back from the in-laws. She could live like the little daughter just for a while longer. There are stories that my grandfather was different from other people, crazy ever since that little Jap bayoneted him in the head. He used to put his naked penis on the dinner table laughing, and one day he brought home a baby girl wrapped up inside his brown Western-style greatcoat. He had traded one of his sons, probably my father, the youngest, for her. My grandmother made him trade back. When he finally got a daughter of his own, he doted on her. They must have all loved her, except perhaps my father, the only brother who never went back to China, having once been traded for a girl. Okay, and I want y'all to keep an eye on that one, because one of the aspects of Chinese tradition, they've tried to sort of get away from it now, but that you'll read this in a lot of literature and history, is that male children are much, much preferred over female children. Okay, this is something, like I said, that is still going on in China. They're trying to kind of play it off, but it's still there. Okay, so for the narrator's father to realize that he had been traded for a girl would have been a great insult to him. Okay, that's why he probably stayed in America. He doesn't want to go back to China where nobody wanted him. Okay, 3354. Let's go to she kept. She kept the man's name to herself throughout her labor and dying. She did not accuse him that he be punished with her. To save her inseminator's name, she gave silent birth. He may have been somebody in her own household, but intercourse with a man outside the family would have been no less abhorrent. All the village were kinsmen, and the title shouted in blunt country voices, never let kinship be forgotten. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the video right now and go to the next one, but keep in mind this idea that his name is never mentioned and neither is hers, and we'll discuss names right now and the importance of names.